All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown. All three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing Red Cloud's Revenge by Terry C. Johnston. This is book number 2 in his Plainsman series, and I believe there are about 15 or 16. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I was right. It's amazing it's a miracle whenever I'm right. 16 books in his Plainsman series. It's a series of Western novels starring Sergeant Seamus Donegan of, the U.S. Cavalry. Okay, so I read the first book in the series and reviewed that. I can't remember what that one was called, though. Let me see if it's right here. It is called Sioux Dawn. Sioux Dawn. Sioux spelled Sioux. Dawn spelled Dawn. Sioux Dawn. That was book number 1. This is Red Cloud's Revenge. This book and this series, we'll get to what it's about in a second, but let's talk about the cover first, because I love graphic design and cover illustration, and I think most of these books in the series have just great Western art on them that wraps around. It looks just good. I really like it. I like the little icons up here and on the spine and everything. It's just a dope series. In fact, I'll just pan down here through my library and show you. That is my entire TerryCJohnston book collection right there. Over half of those books, like I said, 16 of those books are part of this Plainsman series. He's also got his Mountain Man series and a few others. Anyway, this book came out in 1990. Terry Johnston is one of my favorite Western writers. It follows directly on the heels of Book 1, Sioux Dawn. Book 1, Sioux Dawn, was about the, I can't remember what it was about. It was about, one of the Indian massacres in the plains, in the South Dakota plains or something like that. This one is the Northern Plains. This one is specifically called Sioux Dawn Showdown in the Northern Plains, 1867. Now, Seamus Donegan is the character we see this through. This whole series really reminds me of Bernard Cornwell's Richard Sharp, Sharp's Rifles series, where the character of Sharp is a soldier in the English army, and we see every single battle of the Napoleonic Wars through Richard Sharp's life to the tune of some 23 books. This is similar to that, where we see all the Indian Plains Wars and all the Rocky Mountain Indian Wars and all of the wars that happened in the Western United States in the 1800s through this Sergeant Seamus Donegan's eyes. So that's kind of what I would compare it to most. And Terry C. Johnston's writing is just every bit as good as Bernard Cornwell's. And these books do not flinch away from the harsh realities of warfare in the old Western United States, just like Bernard Cornwell does not flinch away from that subject in his stories about the Napoleonic Wars. There are some bloody, brutal battle scenes in this, and the characters, some of the characters in this are grim and dark. Okay, so this is about the Northern Plains Indian War in 1867, followed on the heels of the other Plains War Seamus Donegan had to fight in, the Fetterman Massacre. That's what it was. It was the Fetterman Massacre. Because it's mentioned a lot, because our character Seamus Donegan is still processing through some PTSD of the Fetterman Massacre, which was one of the first ones that he saw. And now he's in line, like I said, to see a whole lot more. And we're only at book 2 here. So, Red Cloud, part of the Fetterman Massacre, some of the Indians, they escape. Red Cloud now seeks to purge the white man completely out of his hunting grounds, completely out of the West forever. And this is a historically accurate and brutal look at this attempt of these Indian nations trying to purge the white men back out of their lands. Because at this point in time, a lot of the Indians has already sort of been gathered up and put into reservations, but not these guys. The Sioux, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho together, they just lay siege to every town in this area, every fort. A lot of their sieges fail, they lose a lot of men, but some of their sieges are successful. Like I said, this is an unflinching look at what happens not only in war, but when the Native Americans would capture the U.S. soldiers. It was so bad that a lot of the soldiers in the U.S. cavalry would rather, if they saw they were losing and the loss of the battle was imminent, they would just rather commit suicide than be captured. And this takes a really unflinching look at that. So we open up the book with historical figures like Jim Bridger, who's a former trapper, now turned, like in the early 1800s, he trapped beaver in the old in the West, and now he's kind of turned into an army scout because he knows the area so well. In fact, there's a great scene in here where Jim Bridger recounts the story of Hugh Glass and how Hugh Glass was attacked by a bear, and they sort of left him for dead, because Jim Bridger was part of that story, and that story was made into a great movie with Leonardo DiCaprio called The Revenant. So if you want to watch The Revenant, it's a very accurate, well, I don't know how accurate the movie is in describing the Hugh Glass story, but Jim Bridger, young Jim Bridger, was part of that story. And there's an interesting section of this book where he recounts the Hugh Glass story to Seamus Donegan and how Hugh Glass survived the bear attack, but they thought he was dead and they left, and then, the guilt and everything. But anyway, as a lot of these things are happening, as Jim Bridger and a few other historical characters in this sort of war come across Seamus Donegan, a lot of history is explained and things like that. And, you can see the horror of the war through Seamus's eyes. And the fact that he's already kind of survived the Fetterman massacre, and now he's embroiled in the midst of another one. He's traumatized. He's becoming hardened to life. His loved ones, he doesn't know. They can't react really well to it. And so that's just an interesting Western novel. It's got all of the gunplay, all of the action and adventure that you would want from a novel. Like, there's some great scenes on these snowy cliffs where, they're kind of battling it out and people are falling off the cliffs. It's just really good. I actually enjoyed the hell out of this. I thought the first one was pretty good, but this book's almost a 10 out of 10 Western. It is absolutely that good. And I can't wait to start, getting to the other books in the Plainsman series. So there's that, Red Cloud's Revenge.